thing. So I just wanted to sort of say that. I know it may seem like a very obvious thing, but it always amazes me that there's so many different sort of titles for it. So to be clear, and also it's at the top. So it comes under your, or very near your contact details. So as Yael showed you on screen, some of the other, some of those sample CVs, your name and your contact details are at the top. Directly underneath that comes the profile bit. And the reason for this is that this is really your elevator pitch, basically. It's that 1 minute that you've got in the elevator with whoever it is that's that influential person that you're going to meet. I don't know if many people know that on average, it's about 7 or 8 seconds that an employer or a person will spend looking at your CV. And this profile part is really the bit where you need to capture, you need to draw them in. There's another, I think, sort of element with CVs that people don't like to sort of spend too long and actually try to sort of work out, you know, reading between the lines. They just want who you are, a bit about you, so it should be 2 or 3 short sentences. So yeah, going back to that sort of 7-8 seconds, you haven't really got a really small window of opportunity to kind of get across who you are. So it's your elevator pitch. It's 2 or 3 short sentences, and it's 3 things really within those short sentences. It can be a bit longer, sometimes they are. Who you are, what you have to offer, and it also may be your career and your career ambitions. And I don't mean that that's a long involved sort of, you know, I'm looking to be the next strategic director or the, you know, the marketing manager. It just might be looking for the next opportunity, looking for the next step, or if you're a career changer, might be, you might put at the bottom of that profile, now looking to, you know, to work in the field of X. So if you keep that in mind, the who you are and what you're offering and what your expectations, what you're actually sort of now looking for, that gives somebody really that all their questions have been answered right at the top of the page. Okay, and from there on in, after that profile, after that, they're going to feel more comfortable looking at your CV, more secure, thinking, yeah, I'm about to invite this person for an interview. So and it's really about, that profile is about, what do you specialize in? Can you find a job title that you fit the part for? And I know that's not always an easy fit or an easy find, but if you think about it in those terms, and particularly if you're looking at a job description, that can help. But even if you're not, and even if you're reinventing your CV, what you specialize in, and that job title really, really helps. So that can be, for instance, as a careers advisor, you know, I'm specialize in delivering workshops and giving advice and one-to-one sessions. Okay, that's very simplistic because I know that I'm a careers advisor, and if your career is a bit more complicated, you may need to play around with it, but try to think about it in terms of a job title. Okay, because unfortunately people like to fit everything in boxes, in neat compartmental boxes, and simplistic. And again, this is going back to that you are solving the employer's problems. You are the answer to their problem of that role that they're advertising. And I think this is where we sometimes get confused with that profile of thinking, well, it's a bit of a story. So, so following on from that, keywords. So, and if I might be able to show you on screen in a second. So keywords: communication, analytical, problem solving, negotiation. I mean, I'm just picking out a few. There are thousands that obviously would relate to whatever your profile is. But those keywords are really, really important to be included. That's what's going to sell you, and that's what's going to explain who you are. So I guess what I should say is if you're not sure who you are, or you have, you know, a different background in a few different areas, you're a career changer, you haven't worked for a while. And I think this is, again, I've reiterated, this is where it gets confusing. But be creative with that profile. You really can tailor it to actually what you want to say about yourself. So if you used to work as a lawyer and now you are looking for an events role, okay, your legal background and being organized will stand you in good stead, and that can be used in your profile. So you could start it might say something like a dynamic and organized individual with a background in law, looking to work in events, excellent communication skills, highly organized, and analytical, easily solves problems. So you're putting those things, you're basically capturing and taking elements of what you're offering. So I'm hoping sort of reiterating the point, but I just wanted to know that I know for many of you that your background might not be completely straightforward. And that also the same, and I'll go to the other end of that, that if you're a student or a graduate, you don't need to just put, I'm a student and I'm looking to learn. You know, you can say second year economics undergraduates, strong interest in developing a career in accountancy, highly numerate, strong analytical skills, previous experience of working in a range of environments. I'm sure I can't show you this on screen, but so I'm just reading them out. But so you see, even the student profile even is actually coming from the point of view of what are you offering. And that's also the same if you have only just done some volunteer work and you haven't worked for a while, or you haven't really worked, maybe if you've been raising a family. Think about what you've been doing in your life and what you've got to offer somebody. That is really what this profile kind of relates to. And it's really about being very clear and succinct. The other thing that I just thought I'd mention, which I think people sometimes get confused on, is sometimes it's written in the first or the third person. And either way is completely fine, just as long as, again, it's consistent. So if you've written in the first person in your profile, then continue that in the rest of your CV when you're writing about your work experience. And the same way, if you're obviously writing in the third person, and what I mean by that is the third person, you know, you're writing like a dynamic, or you know, you're writing about yourself as opposed to I am a you know, I am a marketing manager with a background in X, Y, and Z. So consistency, succinct, transparent, and open and honest. You can be more creative with the profile. If, let's say, you haven't worked for a while, you could put having taken a long career break and having built up some voluntary work experience in admin, now looking for the next role, that kind of thing. So you can be really open in that profile as well. That is something that we think that we encourage. And just finally on the profile, you can use this for your LinkedIn profile as well. And actually, it's probably quite good if it's similar, because many employers will perhaps look at your CV and might go and look at you on LinkedIn as well. So if your LinkedIn is out of date or not been refreshed, then it's worthwhile going and making it sort of similar. And actually, if you've done it on your CV, then it's quite useful to use it for LinkedIn or any other social media platform. You can also use it in a cover letter or in an email. If you are writing to an employer applying for a job, you can take those 3 lines, your elevator pitch, as we said, and put that into a cover letter as well and use it. So it's quite useful to have. And also in networking as well, if you were in a networking situation, you know, online at the moment, then, you know, you can think about it in that way. So I'm not sure who I'm handing over to, but those are my insights into the profile, and I hope that you found it useful.
Okay, I think it might be an idea now to take a look at the main body of the work experience, which I think would be really helpful to people. Richard, would you like to perhaps talk about that for a little bit? Richard, can you hear me?
Yeah, can everyone hear me? Okay, so yeah, the main body of the work experience is obviously very important. The first thing to think about is, where possible, to try not to have any career gaps. So, you know, I see a lot of people that, for example, they're going for, let's just think of an example, they're going for a tutoring job. They want to be a teacher or a tutor, and they've only put on things on their CV that are related to that. So previous tutoring or previous teaching jobs. But when you look at their work experience, it shows that they've got some career gaps in there. So, you know, I'll often encourage those people, even if it's a job not directly related to the job you're applying for, to try and eliminate, where possible, the career gaps, because employers will often think, oh, why hasn't that person been working? And will come to the wrong conclusion that they're not employable, you know, and they'll think to themselves, well, if no one else wants them, why should I have them? That kind of thing. So career gaps in a CV are very important as well. If you've had some time off, perhaps you've been raising a child, or you know, you've been off during this COVID period, then you need to think carefully about how you reflect that, rather than just leaving it completely blank. Sometimes it's better to actually say what you've been doing. So you can say, you know, I did a course, I did some voluntary work, you know, maybe you helped out a friend with their business. You know, the more sort of active you come across, the more that you can show that you've been doing, the more effective it is for the employer. So I think that's worth bearing in mind as well. Obviously, you don't want to go into loads of detail if it's just, you know, a short period out of work, but just some, you know, a couple of bullet points saying what you've done is normally enough. So that's the career break. But when you're looking at filling your work experience section, one of the most important things is the job title that you give yourself. You ideally want to have a job title that's most related to the jobs that you're applying for. So for example, if you're applying for a job as an administrator, and in your previous role you were a receptionist, but you also did a lot of administrative work, because receptionists often do, then you may want to consider calling yourself an administrator, or even, you know, if you feel more comfortable with it, an administrator / receptionist, so that, you know, it's more appealing to the employer. You know, if the employer is looking for an administrator and they've got 70 CVs in front of them, and they see receptionist from you, but, you know, another 30 CVs that have got an administrator as their job title, then they might immediately just go to those, because it's the obvious thing for them. They want an administrator. They see that someone's been an administrator, then they're going to shortlist based on that. That's the initial kind of thoughts that employers have. So you need to think carefully about what your job title is. Obviously, you don't want to lie. You can't say that you were something you weren't. But, you know, for example, a guy I was chatting to first thing this morning, he was logistics, but he also did a lot of operations as well. Now, if he's applying for a job in operations, then I'd tell him to just call himself operations assistant or operations manager. If he's applying for a job in logistics, because he's been doing that as well, just call himself logistics manager. So you can be clever, you can be creative with what you put. Equally as well for the bullet points. So usually we'd recommend having a job title, the company you've worked for, and the dates that you worked there, and possibly the location as well. And then underneath that, you know, we recommend, it's not the only way to do it, but we recommend having a series of bullet points. Some people have a paragraph, but it's been proven, and having talked to a lot of employers over the years, it's been proven that it's easier for employers to read when it's bullet points. So, you know, a series of bullet points, you know, again, it's a balance. You don't want to have too many. I've seen CVs with 30 bullet points underneath the job. And I've also seen CVs with 1 bullet point. You want to have a balance. You also want to make sure that the jobs that are most related to the job you're applying for have got more bullet points than the jobs on your CV that aren't related to the jobs you're applying for. And how we generally suggest you write those bullet points is it's your duties in the job, but you can also combine it with your achievements as well. So it's what you did and what the result of that was. So, you know, for example, for a salesman, you know, spoke to the company's biggest clients, closing deals. For example, negotiating and closing a £50,000 deal for the company. So you're saying the duty and the result of that duty. It's just more effective. You could just put what your duties are, but if you can show something that you achieved from those duties as well, it shows that not only are you able to do that skill that they're looking for, but you also achieved it. And it just comes across as a lot better when you're... I
think it also creates, doesn't it, Richard, a sense of drive and energy through your CV. And what employers like at the end of the day is hiring people who they simply think are going to get the job done. And so that sense of that creating that sense of, I am a person, I'm applying for this job because I know how to get it done for you, is very, very attractive to an employer. So that sense of drive, that sense of energy created through writing about things you have done and things you have delivered in previous workplaces, as Richard described, is really, really important.
Yeah. So that's the work experience. I think if you've done a job that is really relevant and related, or if not even the same as the job you're applying for, I would try and have your work experience high up on your CV. You know, if, for example, you know, some people would have their education, they have their profile and then their education at the top. But if your education isn't really related to the job you're applying for, there's no point in having your work experience down at the bottom of the first page or on the second page. So I think positioning of things, as maybe we mentioned this briefly earlier, but positioning of things is very important as well.
I'd like to add one more point. When Yael was speaking earlier, we took you through slides that showed you. Here is a job, and it had what we call a job description that had all the responsibilities of the job, and then the skills and experiences that a person needs to be able to fulfill that job, the person spec. Now, sometimes when you apply for a job, you don't necessarily have such a fulsome and detailed description of what you're going to have to do and the skills you need. However, you can still infer, you can imagine what those skills and experiences are simply by the job title. So, for example, what I mean by that is you may have applied for a job that from a very simple, you know, 2-line classified advert that says receptionist needed for busy accountancy practice. That's all you know about it. There's no job description. It's just a job in a local business, but you know it's a receptionist, you know it's an accountancy practice, and you know it's busy, because they've told you that in the ad. So again, you're perfectly able to shape your profile and the content of how you fill your jobs according to the small amount of information that you do have about the job. So if it's a receptionist role, you know you've got to have, by the way, I've just seen some questions on the chat. I will come back and answer those in a minute. If it's a receptionist job, you do know that you've got to have strong communication skills. You've got to be able to deal well with customers and clients. So customer relationship skills, communication skills are going to be important. If the job is in an accountancy firm, which again is in the simple example I gave you, if you know it's in an accountancy firm, you know that discretion is going to be important and confidentiality because there are going to be customers. You know you're going to be surrounded by professional people as well, so that's important. And if the last thing you know is that it's busy, You've got to have good organisational skills, because you've got to be able to prioritise your workload in a busy context and deal with things when the pressure rises a little bit. So even if you don't have a proper job description, please don't worry. Look very, very carefully at the little amount of information that you do have about a job, because you can still shape the content of your CV to be able to match well what the demands of the job are, and make sure you give the employer exactly what they need to show that you match the demands of the job. And of course, if you tell the employer through your CV how closely you match the demands of their job, it's very, very hard for them to turn around and tell you you don't match, because of course you have just told them that you do match. So always, as we've been trying to explain, focus very, very clearly on looking at what's important in the role, either because they've told you that through a job description, or because you have to imagine what that might be through sensible intuition, and make sure you match as closely as possible. Now, just looking at a couple of questions we've had. Judith has asked, how far should the work experience go back on a chronological CV? Yael, do you want to, or Melanie perhaps, maybe you could answer that question.
Sure, sorry, just realised I wasn't mute. I was muted. Yes. On TV, there's no actual one answer for this. The thing is, you don't want to go back too far. I think the important thing is that it's ageless. It talks about the experience that matters for the job that you're going for. So you go as far as you need to, but I would say if you're going to go back more than 10 years, that's going to be too long. Whatever you're applying for, that's too long. So write what's relevant, but don't go back too far, I think is what I would say.
Thank you. Yes, so just in case the line was a bit blurry for some people at that point.
My connection was unstable at that point, apologies.
No, please don't worry. What's really, really important is to make sure it's ageless. Simply prioritise what's important. However, as a rough rule of thumb, 10 years-ish, but of course it depends upon the experience and when you gained it. Anything that is too old is unlikely to be able to showcase you positively for a job in today's world. What's too old? Well, I don't have the precise answer to that. If it's 30 years old, it may be too old. And believe me, my own personal CV can very happily take me back 30 years. Doesn't mean I put it all on there. So again, it really, really depends on what you're saying. Somebody else has asked, do you list the job experiences? Do you start with the most recent ones? And again, as Melanie and everyone else has been saying, in principle, yes, but that is couched in the context of what's most important should be highest up your CV, because that's what the employer is going to read more clearly. Okay, does anyone else have any questions they would like to ask, and put them on the chat now, because we're coming towards the end of our talk about the CV. It's very hard in a webinar where we're taking people through a whistle-stop tour like this to give very, very precise detail about everyone's personal situations, the work experience they've had, the jobs they'd like to apply for, and how closely their specific CV can be shaped to match those demands. This is very much an overview. The good news is, however, our programme of workshops is starting online, and we would love it to be in person. It doesn't look like that's going to be happening, sadly, anytime soon. But we are going to be able to start running our workshops online via Zoom in a couple of weeks' time, and our CV workshop is running for the first time, so do take a note of this. Our CV workshop is running for the first time via Zoom on Thursday, the 18th of June. Now, because it's a workshop, it won't be an all-comers event like a webinar is, where many, many people can log on and take from it what they'd like to. It's going to be a workshop, so it is going to be very, very interactive. And with exercises and activities to do. So with that in mind, it is going to be registering for the event, but that we'll write out to you, and you'll be able to find out details about that. So that's Thursday the 18th, and that'll be a much more in-depth look at the CV. And our webinar program is also going to include, again, following on, it's going to include a workshop about transferable skills, which is all about harnessing the skills you've gained from one aspect of your work through to another field of work, particularly making sure that you can take it from one field and move it across to another. We're also going to be looking at networking, how we can reach out and connect with people for the purposes of job search. And another one on LinkedIn, which is so important. It's always been important, but now in the times we're living in now, it is as important as it's ever been, if not more so. So watch out for our workshop program, which is coming on. There will be a maximum of about 10 delegates per workshop, because it's going to be a much more personal approach to learning information and gaining skills. So we have to cap it at that number. Please note, there's no charge, as with most of our, virtually all our employment services, there is no charge for joining one of our workshops, but you simply have to register so we can book you on and make sure you attend at the right time and all of that. Somebody else has asked about suggestions for those who've just finished university and don't have a great deal of experience for the work experience section. Heather, can I ask you to answer that question, please?
Sure, absolutely. So if you just finished university...
I should add, before I do, the reason I've particularly asked Heather is because she also works in a university careers department, as well as we benefit from her experience in Work Avenue, but so do students in other places as well. So Heather, over to you.
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, look, students get in a bit of a pickle with this, thinking, oh, I've got nothing to put here. Think back to any volunteer work that you've done, any ad hoc work that you've done, even if that was helping a family member in a shop, I don't know, creating an invitation for a friend, helping them out, anything that you've done that's outside of your studies, you can put down as experience. And that's absolutely anything that basically just demonstrates other experience that you have. If you really have absolutely nothing at all, then what we would sort of suggest is looking into some volunteer work and looking at something that actually you could take on, that then you could add on to your CV. And also thinking back if there's anything that you did in school. Often there's work experience that that actually is compulsory now with schools, even if that was 1 week. Any projects as well. I also say to students that depending on the type of course that you're studying, but if you're studying, whether it be economics or marketing or finance, your studies and what you're actually training and aiming to qualify in, you will have had to have done some of the elements of those in your assignments, in your work, in your essay. So you could put a project as work experience. That also is quite useful to do as well. So I hope that answers some of the questions.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Now, before we close, I just want to finally share with you, I'm just going to go back to our PowerPoint again. Hopefully I can see that on the screen. Because just to close, we do have some top tips, and this PowerPoint, very happy to share. It will be available afterwards. But just some final top tips that we'd like to share with you before we close. The first is think like an employer. Now, it's very, very easy when we write our CV to view it all through our own perspective. But think how someone else looks at it. Think how an employer would read all about you. They don't want to know the minutiae of you. They actually want to know how you fit the demands of the role. And that's the focus you need to give to your CV. Look at it through somebody else's eyes, not your own. Very easy to say, much harder to do, but that's why we're here to help you. So always think like an employer when you write your CV. As we've said a few times this morning, tailor your CV to the position you're applying for. Your CV is not there to get you the job, but by golly, it's absolutely of vital importance to get you to the interview. So make sure it's targeted very, very clearly to the demands of the position you're applying for. Less is often more. Now, what we mean by that is it's very, very tempting to dump everything into your CV and make sure that people know absolutely everything there is to know about you from the year dot. And we're absolutely paranoid that that final bit of detail that we may not put on is that final detail that will be the defining difference between somebody employing us and somebody not employing us. It just doesn't work like that. Keep focused on what the key demands of the role are and matching those. Less, therefore, will be more. As Richard said, do account for gaps, very, very important, and fill your gaps with substantive things of interest that you can do, very important. And as I think I may have said earlier, think very much in terms about what I have done and what the resultant output was. What I have done and what I have delivered. This helps create a sense of drive, of energy, a person who gets stuff done in the workplace. And ultimately that is very, very attractive to an employer. And that's what you're trying to create. Now we've written here, create a coherent narrative. Now what we mean by a coherent narrative is tell the story. Tell the story of why you are right for this job. Don't tell the story from the year dot, once upon a time I was born and I went to school and I did these GCSEs, unless all those points happen to be relevant, but tell the story of all your relevant bits that match you perfectly to the job. This makes it so much easier for the employer to understand why you are interesting to them. And very, very finally, our final top tip is your CV is your advert. Everything we've just been talking about and all the other top tips, it's the means by which you sell yourself to the employer. It's not your autobiography. It's not your life history. Think advert, not autobiography, and you'll definitely be on the right lines. Now, I need to close today. We've run out of time, sadly, but I'd like to close by thanking you, first of all, for joining us on today's webinar about the CV. A few things to take away with you. The webinar will be available on our YouTube channel. It'll also be available on our website. We will be sending around those slides that we've shared today. So for those of you who are registered with us, we will be able to send you those slides. If you haven't received them, just drop any of us an email and we'll be able to send them to you. If you would like to meet with one of our employment advisors, and we do have a team of them at Work Avenue, it's very, very simple. Either phone us. Our phone number is 020 8371 3280. That's 020 8371 3280. Or visit our website, and you can simply ask for an appointment through our website. Our web address is The Work Avenue, that's all one word, theworkavenue.org.uk/meeting. theworkavenue.org.uk/meeting. It really, really couldn't be easier. We really want to assist. And the best way of helping you is to talk to you, to understand your situation, what you're looking for, and how you can get around. Melanie's kindly put that on the chat. And how you can, how we can help you narrow the odds in your favor so that it becomes much more likely that you will find work than not find work. Sadly, we can't make those guarantees, but we can certainly narrow the odds in your favor. And I'd also like to give a big shout out to our CV workshop, which I just did before. It's running on Thursday, the 18th of June, so you'll hear more about that, but that's Thursday the 18th of June. And on Wednesday the 17th of June at 2 o'clock in the afternoon is our next employment webinar. It's entitled Securing Your Next Role, My LinkedIn Story. And this is being run for us by one of our connections, a gentleman called Adam Katz, who spent 2 years in his job search. And during that 2 years, he learned so many valuable skills about how not to use LinkedIn to apply for work, and really, really importantly, how to use LinkedIn to apply for work. So Wednesday, the 17th of June, Securing Your Next Role, my LinkedIn story, which is all about using LinkedIn for job search. Thursday, the 18th, our CV workshop. Visit our website to book an appointment with an advisor or phone us. Either way, we're very, very happy to help. And I thank you all for joining us this morning. And on behalf of me and my colleagues, that's Yael, Melanie, Richard and Heather, thank you all for taking your time out with us this morning. Many, many thanks. All the best. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Bye.